Hello and welcome to Yesterday's Airlines. Today I want to discuss something new which has just appeared from NG Models and is being called NG Lite. It's a new sub-brand from NG and it seems to be aimed primarily at entry-level collectors rather than people who are looking for the ultimate model in 400 scale. So it's a really interesting concept and illustrates the innovative way that NG are approaching 400 scale. They recently produced the Ultimate Collection boxes and models, which is right at that top end of the market, and now they have this NG Lite offering, which is at the lower end of the market with their standard models, which are still some of the best in 400 scale in that kind of mid space, I guess. So it's an interesting concept and there's a little bit more to it than just what I've said there. So let's get on and have a chat about that in a second. Before we do so, chuck a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much. Follow me at Yester Airlines on Instagram and Facebook, and don't forget to keep an eye on yesterdaysairlines.com, where a lot of this kind of news pops up and I do a huge amount of work in the scale. Okay, so NG Lite. What is it that NG themselves are saying on this topic? Well, NG first mentioned this yesterday on 10th June, and what they basically said was that following the grand release of their new 747-100 mould, they've used the mould to create the first 400 scale version in the Boeing House Colours test flight livery, commemorating the 50th anniversary of the 747's first flight, so on and so forth. And the new brand NG Lite, they say, represents simplicity and liveliness and lightness. And in the future, they will bring highly cost-effective new products through this brand, which will also still be part of the CRP Rewards Point program. And the concept of the brand is very much to create slightly lower quality models optimized towards people who are on a budget. So that is what they're saying the brand is for. And NG has form in this space because it was back in 2021 NG Models who introduced me to Jet Hut. And you may recall that I wrote quite a lot about Jet Hut and their connection with the JAL collection models. And Jet Hut has had this very similar aim to produce lower end models. But obviously the problem that Jet Hut, I think, has found is that their models are just not quite good enough. Lower end models, they were relatively weak and they were still being priced around the same kind of level as lower end 400 scale, and they just weren't up to that. Now, interestingly, Jet Hut still are making models. They just have been making a selection of models for the China only market. They've made a China Eastern MD-11, they've made some China Southern MD-90s, and they've made some China Southern Saabs as well. And they all look okay, but really a bit too cheap, really, for anyone who's actually collecting the models. And even though I had high hopes for them initially, I think Jet Hut just slightly too low in the marketplace. And I don't believe that the 787s that they put onto market as a Virgin and an All Nippon, I don't think they sold particularly well at retailers. So yeah, that's Jet Hut. But the concept is still good to have a low-end brand that works for people who are looking for a good quality model, but one which is not going to cost them the earth. Because one of the criticisms you do hear against NG is how much the models cost, though I don't perceive them to be particularly more expensive than other brands. Some people do. So if NG can create models which are basically excellent NG products, but without some of the features that their standard NG products have, and they're saying here that they're going to be lacking aerials, and some future releases may not have rolling gear, for example, so they're just cutting some of those bits, but and there may even be some simplified printing, I believe, in places. But broadly, the models will still look like NG models, and they'll be using the NG molds. Now, the choice of the first model, which they are releasing here, this NGBOE001, the Boeing House Color 747, is interesting because obviously NG recently sent me out the 747-100 sample, and there were definitely issues with the sample which are identified. And I do think that one of the reasons that this model is the first model that is being used here is because they'd already made this when they'd sent me the sample, and now they realise the sample isn't quite up to the standards that they would usually release on. So these pre-made models can be pushed out in this NG Lite sub-brand. So I do think there's an element of that to it, but as I understand it, NG are saying that they are going to be releasing more models in this NG Lite sub-brand and using different molds as well. So it's not just a case of them trying to get rid of stock, which isn't necessarily the best. And having said that, when you look at the pictures of the 747 release that I'm seeing here, it looks really good. And the printing and the general mold detailing is excellent, just like it really was on the sample. There are definitely areas of the sample that need to be improved, and NG have said they will improve those. And in fact, they've said also that they will produce a standard version of this release in the future on the updated mold. But at the same time, the mold still looks pretty good here, and it's certainly night and day when you compare this to something like the Jet Hub products. Now, in terms of the cost of these models, NG have told me that they are suggesting, so their manufacturer's suggested retail price is $48.99 for this 747, whereas their original was $67.99, so it's a whole $20 cheaper in terms of the MSRP. And I've seen people looking at some of the prices on Taobao, where in China, and it looks like these are retailing for around the same sort of price in China as an A320 from Panda Models or one of those slightly cheaper brands. And also I've seen some prices from Canada. Again, looks like it's retailing around the sort of price that a 400 scale A320 would retail for, and obviously you're getting a 747 here. So there is a substantial cost decrease. It'll be interesting to see whether that makes a difference to people and whether they are more likely to buy it, those lower, entry-level collectors who really interested in buying models but don't necessarily have the same resources as older collectors probably, who would probably be looking more to buy the standard releases. So that's where it is sitting on the price level. And in terms of the quality, as I say, looks pretty much like a standard NG release, and this one actually does have rolling gear. Really, the only major difference here is that it's lacking aerials, and obviously it's on the Series 100 mold, which is not quite as refined as it will be when they produce the final version of that. So yeah, it's an interesting concept. I do think that NG are doing this partly with this model, as I say, because they've already pre-made it and then they realise the mold isn't quite as good as they would like it to be. But I also think that it is a genuine attempt from NG to look at other markets, to capture sales from people who don't want to spend a fortune on the models. And also, I imagine that this is going to be a big way into developing markets in places such as India and Indonesia, places that have a lot of young collectors and people that don't necessarily earn the same sort of money as Westerners do, and therefore are shopping on a budget but still want to have quality product. So it'll be interesting to see how this is met in the marketplace, what retailers think of this, and how it gets priced, especially in markets like the UK, where I do tend to see things going for silly prices, and it'll be interesting to see whether these are actually substantially cheaper when they hit the UK market. But it's an interesting concept, it's a good idea, and the model does look really good. For me, the question is, should I get one? Even though I know there's a later version coming. It is tempting. I mean, it's a 747 in delivery colours, come on. But I don't know. I don't know whether this is a line which will work for me or not. The only thing I would ask of NG is that they make it clear when they produce these Lite models, if they were going to produce a standard version as well, so that you don't have that kind of confusion and feel like you have to buy the Lite version. If you know there's going to be a later one coming out as a standard, then you can wait for that. But I think it's a good idea. I think it's an interesting way to expand their reach in the marketplace. There's some irony here that Aero Classics obviously have never gone down this route of having aerials, and Andrew doesn't even like rolling gear very much. So it's kind of funny that NG have kind of lowered themselves down to the same kind of place that Aero Classics playing. I'll be interested to see if Andrew Klein says anything. But nonetheless, I think that there is a lot of opportunity here. It'll be interesting to see what models they put out on this mold. I have to say, 747s in these kind of classic schemes are probably not what a lot of collectors on a budget are looking for. I'd imagine they're looking more for 787s and A350s and A320s and such. But the concept is good, and it'll be interesting to see how this works for NG. Okay, cool. Well, that's NG Lite. Let's see where that goes to in the coming months. And drop some comments on, what do you guys think? Are you interested in NG Lite models, or do you prefer the standard releases, or do you even prefer the Ultimate Collection? Tell me what you think. But that's it from now for YesLA's Airlines. This is NG Lite. It's an interesting initiative. I'll see you at the next video. Thanks for watching.